A wall is designed to keep strangers out. However, this structure contains internal roots, and a tunnel is hidden beneath its foundation. Here, gates made of slabs weighing up to 20 tons are installed, an obstacle that no single warrior can overcome. Hattusa, Tiryns, Mycenae, and Van, 4 citadels that, quite possibly, were never conceived solely as military objects. Here, familiar historical concepts reach a dead end. We are accustomed to seeing a fortress as a barrier, a clear line between ours and theirs. It is assumed that every detail of such a structure serves this divisive function. This seems logical and understandable, exactly until you begin to study the design of these 4 monuments in detail. Traditional logic simply fails here. Before us are 4 points on the map in 3 different regions. More than 10 centuries separate the creation of the earliest and latest objects. Their creators did not share a common language, unified gods, or proven contacts. But the principle is the same everywhere. This is not just a dividing wall, but a container wall, a structure transformed into a full-fledged architectural space. It seems that ancient masters were building not a defensive line, but a complex engineering complex, for which we do not yet have a suitable term. We will analyze each of these places in detail. We will check mass calculations, study internal volumes, and look into the joints between the stones. In the end, we will face a question, the answer to which will not be another wall, but what is hidden deep within the earth. Let's start with Hattusa. This is a high mountain plateau in central Anatolia, 3,000 feet above sea level. The capital of the Hittite Empire was located here. Around 1650 BC, a metropolis rose from the rocks, which, at its peak of glory, dictated terms to Egypt. However, by 1200 BC, the civilization perished in the flames of the Bronze Age catastrophe, as scholars call a large-scale collapse whose true causes remain a mystery. What we inherited is the sheer scale of the construction. Today's visitor, armed with reports from the German Archaeological Institute, will find there not just a fortification, but a complex system of ramparts and towers that completely ignores textbook diagrams. Particular attention is drawn to Yrkapi, the Earth Gate Rampart. Its length is 820 feet, and the height of the embankment in places exceeds 100. And directly through this massive structure, a stone corridor 230 feet long is cut, connecting the outer space with the inner. This is a real, detailed tunnel passing through the thickness of the wall. Let's think about it. The classical version states, "Before us is a postern, a secret passage for unexpected attacks." This version is plausible, but let's compare it with the facts. A secret exit should be short and as inconspicuous as possible. In Hattusa, however, we see 230 feet of solid masonry with ceremonial portals on both sides, located on the most prominent section of the rampart. The passage is so wide that several people can easily pass through it. Secret objects are not turned into masterpieces of monumental architecture, but the Hittites did exactly that. Why is such a rampart even needed on top? An ordinary wall would have been enough. But the builders created an artificial mountain, pierced it with a tunnel, and faced it with perfectly fitted stone. Research from the University of Trier proves that the angle of inclination of this ramp is calibrated with such precision that it cannot be attributed to hasty construction. This is not just a fence. It is a mechanism. It sounds strange, but let's turn to mathematics. With a height of 100 feet and a length of 820, the volume of the embankment made of stone and soil is tens of thousands of cubic yards. With an average material density of 125 pounds per cubic foot, we get thousands of tons of transferred weight. And all this for one fragment of city defense, in the center of which is a tunnel whose position at such a height is clearly not accidental. It is important to understand that the passage in your copy is not an isolated case. Several similar passages of different calibers have been found in Hattusa. This is a systemic solution. If you look at the city from this angle, the picture changes. The walls here not only protect, but also serve as transport arteries. Resources, people, and water could move within the defensive perimeter itself, remaining protected and not creating vulnerable zones. Archaeologists' reports highlight another detail. The slabs at the Lion and Royal Gates are so massive that their delivery was a complex logistical quest of the Bronze Age. The weight of individual elements reaches 10 to 15 tons. To build such a city required not just a crowd of workers, but uninterrupted stone quarrying, precise routes, and an entire industry for producing high-quality bronze tools. Such a task was beyond the capabilities of a small settlement. After getting acquainted with your copy, the question changes. We are no longer concerned with why a wall is needed. We are interested in what function a wall performs, inside which a 230-foot corridor is hidden. With these thoughts, we will move on, because in Van, this question will find its own answer. Eastern Anatolia, the coast of Lake Van. Above the plain rises a limestone ridge more than half a mile long and 260 feet high. But this rock is not just a foundation for a fortress. It has been transformed into a fortress itself. Data from the University of Innsbruck confirm. In the 9th century BC, the architects of Urartu did not just build on the summit, they carved into the massif. Halls, staircases, and reservoirs are cut directly into the monolith. King Sarduri I, in his inscriptions, presents this precisely as a grandiose work, as a triumph of engineering thought, and not just as a military victory. Here, the concept of fortress finally loses its meaning. At the peak of the rock, remnants of walls are visible, but beneath them is hidden an entire network of rooms, not yet fully explored. Some chambers go deep like shafts. Others are finished so cleanly that they resemble palace chambers. Cisterns are fed with water directly from within the stone, and stairs lead into emptiness, whose purpose today is only a guess. Let's estimate the engineering scale. The density of limestone is about 170 pounds per cubic foot. A typical chamber with a volume of 1,400 cubic feet is about 100 tons of excavated rock. And there are dozens of such rooms here. Even by the most conservative estimates, the builders manually extracted and removed about 5,000 tons of stone. This was done without any chemicals, only with the help of a bronze chisel and the force of freezing water. They didn't build on a mountain, they transformed the mountain itself into a building. The question from Hattusa takes on new urgency. If there the tunnel was merely a hint at the internal space of the walls, then Van demonstrates this principle in its absolute form. The mountain becomes the shell, and life moves inside. And this leads us to the final point, where the scale becomes even more tangible. In Tiryns, you can literally walk inside the wall. Above your head are 8 meters of monolithic masonry. The galleries and halls are designed as if the author didn't want to separate from the world, but to hide an entire building under the guise of fortifications. Peloponnese, Argolis, a short drive from Nafplion. A Mycenaean citadel from the 13th century BC. It is built from limestone blocks weighing up to 14 tons each. They hold together solely by their own weight, without any cement. And inside this incredible thickness, galleries are laid out through which one can walk. Here, our usual theories finally reach a dead end. Judge for yourselves. A classic defensive wall doesn't need internal halls. Its main advantages are its monolithicity and height. Any voids inside make the structure vulnerable. unless they were part of the original design. In Tiryns, we see exactly this. The local gallery with casemates is designed so that the weight of the upper tiers is distributed along the sides of the passage. This is the principle of the corbel arch, which would later be called Cyclopean. Two rows of stones are inclined towards each other and meet at the top. No cement, no supports or iron ties. The structure holds itself up by its own weight, leaving enough space below for a person to walk without stooping. Let's compare this to how we work. A modern tunnel involves concrete, steel, and tons of calculations on paper. The masters of Tiryns had only bronze chisels and colossal experience. Nevertheless, they carved corridors inside an 8-meter-thick wall, and this behemoth has stood for 3,000 years. Scientists from Milan and Munich, who studied the seismicity of these megaliths, came to a startling conclusion. They are incredibly resistant to earthquakes. And this is not luck, but pure geometry. Thanks to the ragged joints, the blocks can vibrate slightly under stress without destroying the entire building. Impressive, isn't it? A polite way of saying it will last longer than our vaunted concrete. But the main question is different. If Tiryns is not just a wall, but a habitable space, then why was it needed? Defense justifies the thickness of the stone, but it doesn't explain the presence of rooms. This is a building hidden inside a wall, a place for living or working. Warehouses, shelters, offices. Archaeologists debate the details, but agree on one thing. To reduce everything solely to protection is to ignore the facts. There's another engineering trick that's often overlooked. These galleries are not on the ground, but raised to a certain height within the masonry. That is, under the floor, there is still monolithic stone. The builders had to delicately balance the pressure from above and the support from below. These are not just boulders piled on top of each other. This is an understanding of statics at a level for which we today have complex formulas. And they had something else. Look at the joints in these passages. The blocks are crooked, irregularly shaped, but fitted so tightly that you can't even slip a blade into the gap. And all this without a drop of mortar. The structure survived the collapse of civilization. It didn't fall. It was simply abandoned. The wall withstood the Bronze Age catastrophe, but the people who knew its secrets did not. And here we smoothly transition to Mycenae. Here, a new thread is woven into history, leading us much deeper than it seems. Mycenae is only 20 kilometers from Tiryns. The same era, the same style. The famous Lion Gate, 2 stone figures above the passage, and above them a 20-ton slab, a single block. Everything has been measured and described in hundreds of scientific papers. But now I don't want to talk about tons and dimensions. I want to talk about what has remained off-screen until now, although it is precisely this that changes our entire perception. 1,000 years after the flourishing of Mycenae, the Greeks of the classical era came to these ruins. They stood before these walls, touched the stones, and tried to understand who built this. And their answer lay not in the realm of science, but in the realm of myths. They decided that an ordinary person was incapable of such a feat. Thus was born the legend of giants, one-eyed Cyclopes, who supposedly erected these walls. This is how the term Cyclopean masonry appeared. You will find it in any textbook. It is officially accepted by science and has been used for 2,000 years. But think for a second. It's not the giants themselves that are important, but what lies behind that word. This word is an admission of helplessness. The Greeks of the Golden Age, who built the Parthenon, created geometry and a system of education, had no idea how their ancestors, 8 centuries before them, moved such massive blocks. The technologies were lost, the knowledge vanished. They didn't even have stories left to explain the process, other than monsters did it. This is not just a curious fact, it's a pivotal moment. We are often told that we don't understand something about ancient construction today. That's true, but we are not the first in our ignorance. The classical Greeks didn't understand. The Romans didn't understand. Oblivion set in not in our time, but 25 centuries ago. The Bronze Age catastrophes severed memory, leaving the authors of classical works in bewildered silence, which they filled with the myth of the Cyclopes. And this raises a question far more uncomfortable than the weight of the Mycenaean slabs. If complex technology can disappear so tracelessly that descendants have to invent giants, then how much more knowledge have we lost? And what of what we see in ruins today do we interpret incorrectly simply because we don't even have a Cyclops version? Official science usually reassures us. Traditions are continuous. Masters teach apprentices. Knowledge flows through the ages. It sounds logical, but in Mycenae, this logic fails. Only a few generations passed between construction and oblivion, and the chain was already broken. The Bronze Age collapse was so powerful that entire layers of engineering art were simply erased from memory. This is confirmed by details. Herodotus, Pausanias, or Strabo wrote about the walls of Mycenae and Tiryns as something natural, like mountains. They admired the scale, nodded to the Cyclopes, but could not describe a single tool or method of work. The information simply did not exist. Between the time of great constructions and the time of great philosophers, there is a chasm that swallowed all the blueprints. It turns out we are not the first civilization to ponder ancient stones. We are at least the third, and most likely not the last. Let's bring all 4 points together. Hattusa with its tunnel in a man-made mountain. Van with a fortress is carved directly into the rock. Tiryns with its habitable walls. And Mycenae, whose secret the Greeks themselves forgot. Different countries, different peoples, different centuries, but the same approach. The wall here is not just a fence between here and there. The wall is here. Inside it are life, roads, rooms. It protects, but it also serves as a space for something else that doesn't fit into our simple definitions. You can check this yourself. Reports from German archaeologists, studies of Urartu from the University of Innsbruck, seismic data from Milan and Munich, all of this is publicly available. The numbers are real, the halls exist. The whole question is what we choose to call it. One could label it a military object, but any clarification, temple, warehouse, or fortress, is merely an attempt to simplify what cannot be simplified. These are not walls in our understanding. These are habitable spaces that have taken the form of walls. A small difference in words that changes everything. And this brings us to the final question that all 4 of these places leave behind. When a society loses the secrets of its own architecture, as happened with the Greeks and Mycenaean architecture, we get a clear lesson in the vulnerability of information. One should not treat knowledge as an eternal trophy in your pocket. It is more like continuous movement. Each new generation either picks up the baton or buries the experience of its ancestors. The masters who built Hattusa, Van, Tiryns, and Mycenae possessed skills that the 3 subsequent great cultures were never able to reconstruct. Before you are 4 citadels erected using a single method. Their creators used a language that fell silent 2 millennia ago. When you find yourself in the shadow of an ancient dome, aqueduct, or megalithic masonry, don't limit yourself to asking about their creators. Instead, consider how many generations before you were tormented by the same enigma. At what point did their logic reach a dead end? These walls testify not to the strength of stone, but to how easily humanity falls into amnesia. A corridor, a vaulted gallery, a massive block. The technology is the same everywhere. But let's shift our focus and look underground. There, two groups of workers are tunneling through 1,750 feet of solid rock. They have no satellite navigation, no laser levels, no way to see their target. Nevertheless, they meet at the designated point with perfect accuracy.